And next up, let's be honest, I was surprised at how little of this conference is about figuring out API monetization, because I think people are starting to figure it out. It used to be the dominating feature of conferences. Some themes I'm seeing so far besides sustainability, it's about creating empathy across different departments so people understand. But I think people are understanding the business value of APIs nowadays. So the next talk has Aaron coming up, the penultimate talk today. Well, besides Mehdi's closing remarks, about unlocking digital partnerships and growing your business using APIs. So definitely centered on that API monetization strategy. So come on board, Aaron. Let's see.
Great. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Really glad to be here. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for your time today. So I want to spend the next 20 minutes to really help share how can you make your organization successful in unlocking digital partnerships and growing your business using APIs. So just kind of quick context on who I am. I'm Director of Product Marketing at RapidAPI. And one of the kind of favorite parts of my job is that I get to see how are organizations approaching creating their API strategies and then executing on them as they're leading innovation at their organizations. And in case you haven't heard of RapidAPI before, we are the owner and creator of the world's largest API hub. It's used by millions of developers because there's tens of thousands of APIs that have been published there from many different API providers. So it's basically a place that helps them in developing software and working with APIs. And we've kind of led this concept of what is an API hub. So kind of with that context, here's what planning to go through today. And by the end of our time together, you have an understanding of thinking about API-driven digital partnerships. What are the top challenges that you're going to face? What is this concept of an API hub? And how can it help with building a partner ecosystem? And then finally, what are some lessons from other organizations that have been on this journey? So first thing I want to do is just kind of take a step back and talk about what are some of the trends overall that are driving interest in partnerships and API strategy. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone at API Days, but your organizations are investing millions of dollars in digital transformation, and that's all driven by APIs because basically every single developer is using APIs as part of their development processes. So if your organization doesn't have an API strategy, then its digital strategy is not going to go anywhere. And just kind of restating that, it's true both in terms of how software is developed today, and then also if you look at how organizations are planning into the future, committed to having advanced API strategies. So we know APIs are important. We know API strategy is important. And it's within this context that the desire to develop digital partnerships comes into play, because that's basically a very important aspect of any API strategy. And so why is that? So let's kind of unpack what are the ways that API-driven partnerships can help grow your business. So first is they'll bring in net new revenue streams for your organization. And the way they do that is by giving you access to untapped markets. So that kind of a simple example I like to think of is, let's say that your business is like a chain of restaurants, and a partner that you bring on is something like a third-party delivery service like a DoorDash or an Uber Eats. So by having a seamless integration to this new set of partners, suddenly you have a much wider distribution channel for your goods. So that's kind of one example, but that analogously can apply across many different organizations where once partners are brought on, it creates new channels to access new markets that the business didn't already have access to. Secondly, partnerships allow you to get more value out of all of your products and services. And the way they do that is without you needing to spend one more dollar on research and development for your existing products, your partners can be developing functionality and extending what you already have available. And so the example I like to think of here is the ecosystem that exists around Salesforce products. And even though Salesforce, like CRM, is a very mature product, there's still many partners whose entire business model comes from extending that functionality. And then the final point is really about driving recurring revenue for your business. So when you have APIs as what you're using to engage with partners, you have a way to have a product that's basically embedded into these other services that are being developed by partners. So rather than other products or services that your organization might sell, these APIs that are bringing in revenue via partners are very sticky. As much as I would like to just end the talk there and say that those are really easy things to go and tackle, most organizations come up with challenges when they're trying to work towards these goals. So let's look at what are some of the top challenges that organizations face when they're working towards this vision of having a partner API strategy in place that will grow revenue for the business. So I like to think of these challenges as kind of the questions that come up when an organization is on this journey. And the first question that really comes up is, okay, so we know the partners we want to work with, we know the APIs we want to share with them, but how do we approach API governance? At best, it becomes an extensive manual effort, but that gets increasingly complicated when you go from one to several partners, when you go from tens to dozens of APIs. So ultimately, even if you have some kind of manual process in place, there's always a risk that the next partner that's onboarded won't be properly set up, or a developer that's added within an existing partner is given access to an API they're not supposed to have access to. So there's that persistent risk. The second question that comes up, I think of more in the category of hoping if we build it, then people will come. And what kind of commonly we'll see is organizations say, hey, I located my partners, I even worked with the developers there, asked them, what are the APIs you want to see from our business? We spent all this effort, we developed these APIs, we've published them to a portal, and no one's using them. Why is that? And really the key there is around developer experience, because unlike the developers within your organization, when you're trying to drive adoption of APIs by developers at partners, they don't have to work with your organization. And if your competitors are offering a stronger developer experience, then they're going to go with them. So that's another key challenge for actually getting these strategies off the ground. Finally, the last question that sort of see coming up is when you think about actually taking APIs within your organization and making those available to partners, and how that turns out to be a bit more of a complex problem just internally than a lot of organizations realize. Internally, APIs can be managed by different API gateways. There are also different API protocols. So besides REST, there's other protocols in play as well. And it actually becomes a challenge to do something as simple as just centralize all the APIs. So even if there's some kind of partner portal available, the development team internally might say, okay, that's great, you've made that available, but it doesn't really work for the APIs that I have and would want to use with partners. So I'm going to try to do this myself, or do it some other way, and then that defeats the whole purpose of what you've tried to do. So what this is all kind of pointing toward is, your organization needing a way to address all these challenges in order to get toward the vision of API-driven partnerships. And so here's where I want to introduce this concept of an API hub and explain how an API hub can help with connecting your APIs to partners. So an API hub offers a single place where developers can find, connect to, analyze, and your organization can manage and govern all of the APIs that you collaborate on with partners. So let's break this down in a bit more detail. So the first aspect of the API hub is centralizing those APIs that you want to share and collaborate on with partners. And it shouldn't matter, are the APIs managed by one API gateway or another internally? It shouldn't matter, is this a traditional protocol like REST or SOAP, or is this an emerging protocol like GraphQL or Kafka? There should be one place within the API hub where all that is centralized. Second is an API hub drives adoption. And so we talked about, there's this challenge of developer experience. So an API hub provides everything that a developer needs to get up and running with your API, and also to continue using it and being engaged with it. They're able to discover APIs, collaborate on them. It's easy for them to get the information and documentation they need to get up and running, and then they can analyze their API usage or their end users' API usage over time. And then finally, an API hub allows you to govern how partners are accessing the APIs. So again, giving you one place to manage all of the different partners accessing the portal and permissions for the APIs being used across the hub. And then the result there is reducing that risk and compliance. So this is kind of a high-level, view of a partner API hub and how that can extend the reach of your APIs. Now I want to drill into what are some of the key requirements here to kind of really deliver on this vision. So first, and kind of within the theme of things required to have a good developer experience, the first thing that a developer from your partner organization will want to do is discover the APIs that you have available. So to make that easy, it's important for an API hub to be able to search all of your APIs and also to apply metadata to those APIs that make it easy to search and easy to navigate, whether that's organizing them into categories and collections or applying tags to them that can easily be searched through or filtered, and even surfacing different metrics about how are these APIs actually being used. So a consumer looking at it can quickly at a glance see whether the API that they're thinking of using has good performance scores, or there's any concerns there. Second, once a developers discovered an API they want to work with, they want to actually test out and explore it more. And within an API hub, that's also something they can do without leaving that experience you've created. They can actually go in and test out making calls to the API. They can take requests and responses and translate it into whatever code that they're needing to use for their applications. And they can access all of the relevant documentation for the APIs that they're working with. If anything's not addressed in the documentation, then there's also should be forums and ways to engage with other developers in the community, as well as from your organization, to get up and running on the APIs in an asynchronous communication manner. And finally, within enabling that strong developer experience is, a key to continuing to keep the developers engaged once they've started developing APIs for your organization is to enable them to analyze how the APIs they're using are actually working. So they have these APIs embedded in applications. They need to know if there's latency with these APIs because that impacts their customer experience and their business. So making this as frictionless as possible by also having analytics as part of the API hub is key. So the other capability that's key is just to double click a bit on the problem of centralizing APIs. We talked about how there's multiple different API protocols in play in any organization. And just to double click on this, the reason that it's important to have an API hub support not just REST and SOAP, but also emerging protocols like GraphQL and Kafka is because these adoption of these is really growing at a dramatic rate. And if you don't already have a development team using one of these, it's very likely that within the next 1 to 3 years, you have a team that is either planning to use or evaluate one of these. So needing to think about not just the APIs in use today, but also over the next year or two. And then finally, we talked about how an API hub should provide governance. The key requirement there is being able to control access at the role level. So for each partner, being able to set what are the APIs they have access to, and then for each developer at the partner, what are the APIs they have access to, and being able to do all that at the API, user, team, and organization level, and even if there's multiple API gateways in use across your organization. So now that we have kind of looked at what's in API Hub and how does that help with engaging with partners, I want to just quickly give some examples of how other organizations have addressed this. So our first example is an organization that had multiple different lines of business. And as an IT kind of shared services organization, the goal was to enable all of these different lines of business to expose APIs to partners. So they were able to do that by putting a partner API hub in place. And actually just one of these, one of the 600 plus partners that they work with, they already saw could potentially bring like over $1 million of new revenue thanks to this partnership. So kind of big impact there. And then the second example is an organization where in the investment space, there's a specific line of business that owned bringing in additional digital revenue. So this line of business located a kind of specific niche of partners within the investment space, in this case, registered investment advisors, and wanted to target accessing those advisors' customers. So decided to serve APIs specific to that advisor's needs. And they used a partner API hub as part of that. So in this example, it's more a single line of business within an organization that's targeting partners to drive digital revenue. And this organization, initially had a question of whether this was something they would build themselves or look at an off-the-shelf options. They decided to go with an off-the-shelf partner API hub because they were able to get to market much faster and also keep their development resources focused on things relevant for investment in their core business. And that's something that we commonly see and recommend as a best practice. So just to wrap up here, if you're kind of thinking about like how do you actually get started with a partner API hub and of all the sort of high level value of it and the capabilities or requirements that we looked at, how do you kind of think of what this would potentially look like at your organization? It always will depend on what exactly the priorities for your business. But typically what we see is the first step of the Partner API Hub is getting an API catalog in place, which gives you one place to centralize all the APIs for the partners to discover. That also includes the governance, the role-based access control we talked about. Then adding the analytics capability, and that applies both for the partner developers and for your internal developers who are publishing the APIs to the hub. And then finally, optionally to add some access and provisioning that can potentially add some automation or accelerate the process of onboarding partner developers. So hopefully that helped with an understanding of the things that an organization should think about when wanting to unlock additional business from partners. The next steps that we'd recommend are actually looking for your organization. What are the objectives for partners using APIs? Who are the partners you would focus on, and how would they drive direct or indirect revenue for your organization? And then finally, what would be the key Partner API Hub functionality that would be important for your needs? So thanks everyone for your time. And now I believe we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A.
Absolutely. That's very interesting. So in your own experience, what is the biggest challenge to being successful in creating that developer experience that makes that a successful partner hub relies on?
Yeah, great question, Jennifer. So in my experience, the number one challenge tends to be, if you think of those three that I mentioned, really around the developer experience side of it. And a lot of organizations kind of underestimate the level of developer expectations there, and kind of how high the bar is in order to really get developers from a partner initially onboarded and interested to work with the APIs, and then continue to keep them engaged over time.
But what part of that developer experience typically needs the most work on? Is it the onboarding or the documentation, or what part of the developer experience is particularly challenging, or what's like an easy win?
Yeah, so of the developer experience, some of the key things we talked about are being able to discover the APIs, being able to connect to and explore them, being able to easily get the documentation and communicate with other developers about them, being able to have analytics about them. The kind of easiest to understand nugget of it is being able to just quickly discover all of the APIs that are available, and having some metadata applied to those to make that easier.
Okay. So as much as possible, try to automate as much of the experience as possible. So because developers reasonably, like all consumers, are increasing their expectations now that APIs have gone beyond mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, I would, for API discovery, I would say it's more about making it self-service and removing friction, and not as much automation. The automation can potentially come into play with when partners are being onboarded and kind of governance policies are being applied. Typically, we'll see organizations want to keep some level of manual controls on how partners are being set up for access to APIs. But a common opportunity for automation is if you have a certain set of APIs where there's less sensitive data being used, then there can be some automation to give partners the onboard access to those automatically.
Do you find that the main use case for partner APIs is not direct monetization, but more creating stickiness or piggybacking on a bigger brand, things like that? Or what do you find is the main use case nowadays in the last year or so for partner programs?
So I kind of think of it in two buckets, and it a little depends on within an organization who's kind of most interested in working with the partners. If you're a leader in like an IT or shared services part of the organization, then it's typically a bit more about partner adoption and really kind of seeing the API usage of the APIs your organization has available, seeing the percent of those being used by developers going up. And that maps to more of kind of a longer term indirect revenue for the business. And in the short term, it's more about what are the number of developers using APIs. On the other hand, for leaders that are kind of actually leading a line of business, like in the investment organization example I mentioned, where they already have an objective of digital revenue, then they tend to be very targeted on focusing on partners who can help them access an untapped market and ultimately bring in more revenue for the organization in the short term.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for educating us on this emerging field still. I don't think it's that strong yet, so it always has room for improvement. So thank you and have a great day, Aaron.
You're welcome. Thank you. Glad to be here.